You've officially grown way more zucchini and summer squash than your family can eat in a day. What the heck do you do with it now? You could absolutely give this away, and that was a common comment that I got on a TikTok video that got a lot of attention a few weeks ago. I seem to know how to give very little information and get the strangest comments over there. I do have to say that YouTube has been a lot different than TikTok in that the whole time that I've had this YouTube for like the last year, I've only gotten one negative comment, and it was a few weeks ago, and it was a video about gardening. I never mentioned a horse in it, and somebody told me that horse people have more money than sense. So that's like the only, I mean, that's not super negative to me, but that is the only negative comment that I've got since being here. But anyway, so every year I tell myself we only need 4 zucchini and squash plants because those 4 plants are going to produce more squash than we could ever eat. And this year I just went and counted, and there's 12 squash plants out there. So I'm going to make a note in my notebook again. Next year only plant 4 squash and zucchini plants because they're going to produce more than you can make. But it's just so easy to stick a squash seed in the ground because they germinate so easily and it fills in a space nice. So preserving squash is super easy. This is one of the easiest things that you can do to feed your family. We preserve food from our gardens so that when it is not gardening season, we still have food to eat. The main goal for me when gardening is to feed my family, and it's eventually to feed my family year-round without having to buy any produce from the grocery store. Now, the only things that I currently really buy at the grocery store are strawberries when they're in the off-season that we want to eat fresh. I do have frozen strawberries. They're good on cakes and ice cream and things, but they're like really juicy. So if my kids want like a really quick snack of just strawberries, it's easier to use the ones that are fresh from the store. We buy bananas at the store because I have not had much success with banana trees in North Florida. I'm not giving up and I'm trying more varieties. But avocados, we buy a ton of avocados and apples. So those will be things that I will eventually focus on trying to figure out how to grow here in Florida. But for now, I'm still buying those things at the grocery store. I think I got a little sidetracked on my thoughts there because I went into talking about things that we don't grow. But my point being that I could give all of this away, but it would defeat the purpose of me growing my garden and me feeding my family. So today I'm going to teach you how I freeze squash, summer squash, and zucchini. Some people don't know that a zucchini is a summer squash, so I always like to throw that in there. But I'm going to show you how I preserve it. There are bunches of different ways, so if you do it different, of course, that's fine as well. I do not wash squash or anything that I pick out of the garden when I am storing it on my counter because it lasts longer if you do not wash it. So I went and washed this earlier before I set it in this strainer so that it's nice and clean and I got all the dirt off of it and where the bugs may have crawled on it. Anyway, so we're just going to take this and we're going to cut it into thin slices. I do right under 1/2 inch because you got to think when you freeze this, it's going to have a ton of water, and then when you go to cook it again, it has a lot of shrinkage. So I do just under 1/2 inch slices. You can also cube this as well if you would like, but I like the slices. You can go later and if you need it cubed for a recipe, cube it. I did way more of this last year. Last year, I think I put away 50 bags of squash, and I don't need 50 bags this year. We didn't eat all of that because we have, here in Florida, we have such a large growing season. Pretty much year-round, we can grow food here because we grow broccoli and collards and cabbage in the winter when we're not growing the summer squash. So I didn't find that we ate the squash as much as I thought we would. My husband and I have been talking, and one of the things that we want to do is work on eating food when it's seasonally available instead of preserving a ton of it to eat later. So like mainly in the winter, eat collards, cabbage, broccoli, and then in the summer, eat your summer squashes, etc. Now, I mean, there are exceptions. Like we have pickles that we're going to eat year round, and then We have tomato products like marinara sauce, salsa, diced tomatoes for chilies because we eat that a lot in the winter. But our fresh vegetables, we want to pretty much that to be what we eat. We've also been researching, and they say that you should be eating the seasonal vegetables and fruits when they're in season and not when they're out of season, because of the nutrients that they have in them are pretty much built for that type of season. And when we got to thinking about it, all of the winter vegetables that we grow here in Florida have a ton of vitamin C in them. So it makes sense to us. My husband is not super involved in the garden. He will do stuff with me, but like his passion is not growing food. That's absolutely my passion. But he has a different passion for health food, vitamins, and things like that. He takes a ton of herbs for different things. He doesn't like modern medicine, so we're kind of like different in that way. I have a cutting board somewhere, but I did not feel like continuing to look for it, so we're just going to use a towel today. I'll give these leftover end pieces actually to my chickens instead of throwing them into the compost pile. It's just a chicken treat. You can absolutely throw them into the compost pile. I just give them to my chickens. I have a small compost turner for like vegetables and stuff, but I mainly use the composted manure from all of our animals. So I don't save a ton of the vegetables for compost when I have things like goats and chickens who can benefit from eating the extra end pieces and stuff. While you're cutting up your zucchini, you're going to want to go ahead and get a pot of water boiling on the stove. Just a large stock pot works fine. I'm going to have to buy a nice wood cutting board that I want to like stay out on the counter all the time so that every time that I need it, I don't have to go digging for it. Ooh, that's like 2 pieces that I've thrown on the ground for the chickens. Have to pick those up and put them in the yuck pile. Like I said earlier, a majority of the time this is what I use for casseroles because we're fixing to blanch it for a little bit, so it'll be a little bit squishy when you unthaw it. But I do take this occasionally, the way that I freeze it, to put it into the freezer. You can bread these a disc when you take them out of the freezer and let them unthaw, and they bread up and fry just fine as well. I do not like them sauteed in a pan that way with onions and butter. The texture is just a little bit off. We do eat them like that occasionally, but it's not our favorite way to eat frozen squash. So we're going to let that pot of water get boiling, and then I'll come back and show y'all how we blanch and freeze them for later. So apparently I forgot to press record when I started this batch, so we'll record the next batch, but you're going to need a strainer with a bowl under just to capture the water that we're going to try and get off of these before we stick them in the freezer. So these have been blanched, so we're just going to put these in, and then I'll explain to y'all how I did this when I do the next batch, since I forgot to press record. We are not cooking these, we are just blanching them enough to kill the enzymes so that when they go into the freezer, the taste and the texture doesn't change, even though I still think it changes a little bit. The hardest part is getting all of the squash and zucchini out of the boiling water. So this is how you blanch squash. You're just going to take a couple handfuls of squash and put them into the boiling water. I call this dipping and flipping. So you're going to let these boil for about 5 to 10 seconds. I don't set a timer, so I just kind of eyeball it in my head, I guess. Just kind of count it off in my head. And then I take my spoon and I stir them up a little bit. Or flip them, dip and flip. And I let them sit for about 5 to 10 more seconds. And then I just scoop them out into my strainer. And then your next batch is ready to go in. This is why I started blanching and freezing instead of canning. Also, canning takes 90 minutes in the pressure canner. So that doesn't account all the time that you've chopped up your squash, gotten them into cans, added water, added your salt, your lemon juice or your vinegar. Some people add those to keep them nice and like firmer. And then you get them in your pressure canner and you have to get your canner up to pressure. And then it's 90 minutes. And so this just became my preferred method for squash. Because to me, it's the same texture and one is not superior to the other. Okay, so those have been in. So we're just gonna dip them out. I'm gonna let these strain for a few minutes just to make sure all of that liquid is off of them before we go on to the next step. I am definitely not growing crookneck squash next year. We do not like the crookneck squash like we like other varieties. We like Black Beauty zucchini, and we are loving this. We love the lemon squash, but we also love the chiffon squash. So next year, I think my entire squash garden is going to be lemon squash, Black Beauty zucchini, and chiffon squash. And I think I'm kicking the rest of them to the curb. I'm just going to turn this off. Like I said, I'm going to let this sit here for a few minutes and kind of let that liquid come off of it, and then I'll show you the next step. Okay, so I think a lot of the water is drained off of these. I just take a very large cooking sheet. Is it a cooking sheet or a cookie sheet? Do y'all know? I don't know. I've seen that debate going around. And I line it with parchment paper. I used to be able to find unbleached parchment paper, but the last year or two, I haven't been able to find unbleached parchment paper. So if you have a good source for unbleached parchment paper, let me know. So we're using parchment paper to line the tray. And then I just go through and I organize all of the little round pieces onto the tray. This is going to be the part that takes the longest. I've been repainting all of our baseboards, and I don't think that I quite understood how big of an undertaking that was going to be when I told my husband that I was going to do it. The house I lived in growing up had wood baseboards. They were unpainted. They were just stained probably. And I kick myself in the butt every time I am down on the floor painting baseboards for the last 4 days. Like, why in the world did we paint our trim? Like, why did we feel the need to cover up wood with paint? Why didn't we just stain it? I think it would have made my life a lot easier. It wouldn't show so much dirt and nicks. We have a robot vacuum, and I swear it has nicked up the bottom of the baseboards everywhere that it hits, especially like the corners of the doors. Those are like super messed up. I might get away with just one row of, or one pan of squash. Just gonna dump it. I think that'll go a lot faster. ADHD is starting to set in. I don't have time for all that. I can put one more on this layer, and then in order to not get out another pan just for this little bit, I'm just going to layer this right on top. Okay, I'm just gonna go set this in the drawer of my freezer for about 20 minutes until they're no longer like wet or sticky to the touch. So go put these in your freezer for 20 minutes. So we've officially made it to the final step of freezing our squash for long-term storage. I use a Homeshore or a Humshore vacuum sealer. I do not think they make this one anymore. It was $60. Had absolutely terrible reviews, but it's worked perfectly for me. My favorite vacuum seal bags are the WeVac vacuum seal bags. So I just put a serving size for our family into these vacuum seal bags. Because you have already frozen this squash before you put it in these bags, it isn't going to stick together, but I unthaw mine before I cook it anyway. So once I get a serving size in each of these bags, I'm just going to vacuum seal them, and then we will store them in the freezer until we're ready to eat them. Like I said, last year I did 50 bags of squash, and that was absolutely too many. So this year I am not doing that many. And if I start getting way more squash than I need, I'm just going to start feeding it to the goats. Or most of my neighbors grow their own garden, so sharing with them isn't really an option. So I'll probably end up just feeding it to my chickens or my goats. And that is a vacuum sealed bag of squash ready for the freezer. And so when we want to use this, we'll just unthaw it and cook it. But for now, we have tons of in-season squash. I'm probably only going to do this blanching and freezing squash 2 to 3 times. And if I don't quit throwing it on the ground, I'm not going to have that much. You can also, like, if you have a specific recipe that you're going to use it for when you're cooking, you can divide it up in the bags, which would be the appropriate portion size for that recipe you're going to use it for. I don't have a specific squash casserole recipe. I throw it in a pan with some cheese and some heavy whipping cream and occasionally top it with crackers and more cheese. And that's my squash casserole recipe. So we are done for the day, and that itty bitty little strainer full of squash gave us 6 bags of squash for the freezer. So squash goes a really long way, and it's a super easy crop to grow, minus the squash bugs and the squash vine borers. So I hope you enjoyed tagging along with me while I preserve some squash for later. And if you have any questions, of course, always drop them in the comments. Later this week, we have strawberry tops from where we made strawberry jam earlier in the year. I have had them in the freezer. I've been meaning to do something with them. So we're going to make strawberry top syrup for lemonades and all kind of good stuff. So tune in later in the week and we'll do that together.